be about a half an hour. And there will be an opportunity after that for Q&A. And I would ask that any questions people have is they put them in the, well, let's see, I guess it has to be in the chat function. And then some of them will be answered along the way, and others we will answer when we get down to the opportunity for the this session is being sponsored in part by Tam Valley Firewise, which we'll talk about a little bit of what that amounts to, as well as Tam Valley NRG, or the Neighborhood Response Groups. And the intention, like I mentioned, is to provide the community in Tam Valley an introduction to the activities that Southern Marin Fire has been involved with over the last couple of years and in the future. A little bit of background about myself. I'm one of several people who my name is Jim Kasper. Live in Tam Valley, been a resident for coming up on 45 years. Been involved with Tam Valley Firewise for a couple of years since it was formed, along with several other people who organized it and a number of other participants. The geography pretty much covers the geography of the Tam Community Services District. As I mentioned, I've been in Tam Valley for a while. What caught my attention from a fire point of view, for those of you who know about it, is what was called the Mother's Day fire, which occurred, 12-acre fire on in a GGNRA property, about as it happens, a quarter mile from my house, on May 9th of 2004. That led to another number of other activities, including getting involved with Fire Safe Marin, which is the Marin County Fire Safe Council. That was organized around 1995, shortly after the Oakland Hills or Tunnel fire. From there, got involved with TCSD, involved with a number of grants related to fire risk reduction, both on TCSD property as well as the community, including things like Chipper Day programs. And then after that, into Fire Safe Marin, as I mentioned, is the local Fire Safe Council. And then in late 2018, organized along with some other people, Tam Valley Firewise as a Firewise community. The intention of Firewise is basically to encourage local solutions and neighbors helping neighbors to minimize fire risk within the community, and hopefully make the job of the firefighters when they have to respond to a fire a lot easier. As I mentioned, Fire Safe Marines, our local Fire Safe Council, probably one of the more active ones in the country. In Marin County, there are about 70 Firewise communities in various sizes, from maybe 10 or 15 households to several hundred or thousand in the case of Tam Valley. So tonight, as I mentioned, is an opportunity to hear from the fire agency, Southern Marin Fire, what's been going on over the last, my view, 18 to 24 months in terms of fire risk reduction. People often think of the fire agencies as being responsible for responding to fires. What has significantly increased, in my view, is the focus on fire prevention in all sorts of ways. Services that are provided, personnel associated, et cetera. And also to talk about upcoming projects through the next year plus. As a point of reference, in the chat box near the top, I have listed a number of websites that could be useful, including those for Fire Safe Marin and Southern Marin Fire. One little point about Fire Safe Marin, they have been running a monthly series of programs on fire videos on fire risk reduction. So it happens there was one today at 6 o'clock. I'd recommend you look at those. They're all recorded. The recordings are available online, and the schedule through the middle of next year is available online on a whole number of topics. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to the Chief of Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Jim, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Just as a point of order, just so that no one is caught by surprise, like a lot of these outreach meetings, we're recording this so that other folks can view that later on. We certainly want to share the wealth. So tonight, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about prevention and sort of what has been going on in the district, as Jim said, especially the last couple of years. And I've got Fred Fred Hilliard, our fire marshal here, along with his team to talk about that. But before I kick it off to Fred, I'd like to provide maybe just a little bit of background, again, specifically to what Jim was alluding to. So over the last 6 years, the district has really been undergoing some fundamental changes with regards to prevention. Like a lot of Marin fire agencies, for many years, we were very response oriented. We didn't really have resources sort of pointed towards prevention and reducing risks. And especially over the last couple of years, a lot has changed. Some of that has been through funding measures like Measure C and Measure U, as well as just us redirecting and reprioritizing some of our resources internally. And frankly, it's a very exciting time, I think, certainly for those of us in this business who really are focused on how do we help increase safety and resiliency in our community. And so we're real excited about sharing some of that tonight. The last thing I would say, sort of before I give it over to Fred, is the last couple of years especially, we have been focused on sharing resources with our partners at the City of Mill Valley. Many of you probably have heard of us talking about shared services. You can see the logo up here right off to my shoulder. And this originated back in 2014. This year, we really accelerated those shared services, bringing both the senior admin team together and the prevention team. So now I serve as a fire chief of both agencies, and we've got Chief Welch focused on some operational things. And we think there's a lot more to come. We're talking of potential consolidation, but we're doing a lot of analysis. But the bottom line is we're trying to bring the two agencies together, align our resources, and also align our services. And that way we have a much broader impact regionally in the Southern Marin area. And so with that, I'm going to kick it off to Fred. And Fred, if you'll walk us all through the details before we open up for questions, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chief. I am honored to be here with all of you. I actually grew up in Tam Valley. I went to Tam High, and it's not a coincidence that there's a Catherine Hilliard in the audience out there that happens to be my mom. But more importantly, she's the president of the Southern Marin Fire Protection District Board this year. And we're very honored to have her with us tonight, along with my team, a few members of my team, Jesse Fagoni and Marshall Now, who Jesse does our vegetation management, runs the program, which is the chippers and the wide area fuel breaks, the road widening, and then numerous other programs. And then Marshall, who's our occupancy compliance inspector. And he's been working alongside of us doing some vegetation management projects, programs, and some defensible space inspections recently, especially during the COVID, where we're not inside businesses. So we all wear a bunch of different hats, but we're all pleased to have the team here. So tonight, essentially what we'd like to do is just share with you a couple of things related to fire prevention and what's going on in Tam Valley and what's going on in the district. So about, as the chief said, about 10 years ago, I took a position, we started a fire prevention position within the fire district, and I came over from the line. I was a firefighter engineer and moved into fire prevention. And from that point, it was development. We developed the Fire Prevention Bureau, division, excuse me. And at the beginning, it was just myself, which was difficult because there was a lot of things to do. A lot of things like plan reviews and construction inspections and vegetation inspections and whatnot. Well, as time went on, it became very apparent that we had a significant risk related to wildfire, and especially after the fires, earlier fires that Jim alluded to, which was Mother's Day fire, we knew that we had a problem that we needed to address. So with the help and direction of Chief Tubbs, we expanded the Fire Prevention Bureau, and we were able to bring on specialists that are now working specifically in those capacities for vegetation fuel risk reduction and defensible space inspections. And that mostly came from Measure U, which was passed several years ago. And now we're working diligently to use those funds responsibly to lower the risk due to wildfire. And one of those areas that we needed to address right out of the gate was we needed to really have some sort of assessment to work from. We knew we had a risk problem. We just didn't know specifically what the risk, how big of a risk, and where the areas that we needed to treat immediately, and things that maybe we weren't identifying just from driving the streets and looking at maps. So we obtained a grant, thankfully, through CAL FIRE, which allowed us to hire a third-party contractor that specializes in this kind of thing. As a matter of fact, the company that we hired, XMR Fire, they were the ones who helped with the Marin County CWPP, which is the countywide wildfire protection plan. And they were able to look specifically at our district and look at it in a capacity where they use science. They did fuel modeling. They looked at past fire history and numerous other areas related to wildfire and risk. And they were able to give us an assessment. And the assessment is, I don't know, I'm trying to do this, but it probably isn't going to work. But anyway, here's the assessment. It's available on our website, actually. It's going to be on the vegetation management page of our website, and it should be up by tomorrow morning. We took it down briefly because we need to make a couple of corrections, but we're going to put it back up. And that report is very extensive, and it's full of information related to our hazard assessment for the district. It encompasses Sausalito, Tam Valley, Homestead Valley, and then Alto, Strawberry. And we are currently going through this 163-page document, and we're pulling information out, and we're basically formulating our programs around the information that's in this risk assessment. So that project is going to take quite a while because it is a very large document. It has tons of information, and the fuel modeling component of it is really where we're looking. So that's where we're looking to get a lot of information from for our vegetation and fuel reduction programs, and that would be run by Jesse Fagoni. So before we go any further with that, I would really like to have Jesse kind of outline what his program is. And so I'm going to give this, let Jesse talk about the vegetation and fuel management program that he runs, and then we'll come back and I'll talk about LRAD and some other projects that we're doing. So Jesse, if you want to, you can share the screen. You on there?
Yeah, I'll share my screen 1 second.
There we go.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Chief Hilliard. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jesse Fagoni, and I'm the Vegetation Management Specialist for Southern Marin Fire. Let's see if I can share my screen. There we go. So tonight, I just want to give a little brief overview of our programs and core projects that we have to reduce and mitigate, the risk of fire. So, so tonight, we're going to talk about the vegetation management overview of the programs. With the creation of Southern Marin Fire's vegetation management program, numerous projects and programs were created to help and protect the citizens within the district. The core programs consist of paved road fuel reduction, chip road programs, both small scale and large scale, fuel breaks, and home assessments. So tonight we're going to talk about the paved road fuel reduction program. And this program is great. It consists of trimming back tree branches over publicly maintained roadways, the limbing of branches off the ground, removing ladder fuels and encroaching vegetation from roadsides and sidewalks, and clearing of vegetation around fire hydrants. And the goal and purpose of this program is to allow safe and efficient response by emergency personnel and improve egress for residents in case of evacuation. Prior to this work being done, residents receive a informational letter, which is mailed out 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks prior, before the work starts. And then this last year, we removed 225 tons of vegetation along 42 miles, along 144 streets. And the next slide I have is the chipper program, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. And this program gives homeowners the opportunity to remove flammable vegetation around their property and help reduce the cost of removing the vegetation. So we have a small scale and a large scale, and I'll talk about the small scale first. So this is a great service. If you're planning on doing any brush clearing or already have, residents can give me a call directly. We do have some small requirements, which is 3 or more homes, making sure the brush is not blocking the roadway or blocking the sidewalk. And, I encourage residents to, do as much as they can. So that's the individual chipper request. And then we also do the chipper weeks. So this is more of a large scale program. The city and county streets are broken into groups based on proximity. And then kind of like the paved road fuel reduction program, an informational letter is mailed out to residents prior to receiving the service. And it outlines the scope of work. And then every month, a group of 10 streets receives a chipper. And some accomplishments we did last year was we sent out pretty much 3,200 notifications to residents. And combined with the small scale and large scale, we removed 508.5 tons of vegetation chipped. And this is along 120 streets. So fuel breaks. Fuel breaks are a great way to help reduce the threat of wildfire in areas where dangerous buildup of fire-prone vegetation is prevalent. Some of the work to create a fuel break includes thinning and removing flammable understory vegetation while leaving the majority of larger, more fire-tolerant tree species in place. There also the removal of dead or dying vegetation, and then limbing up branches. And what that does, that really reduces the risk of fire traveling up. And we call those ladder fuels. So we want to remove the light flashy fuels below the trees before it gets up in there. So that's why we do that. And last year we did 11 sites and we removed 60 tons of vegetation. And so another program we have is home assessments. And this is a great opportunity. It provides residents with education on flammable vegetation and defensible space on their property. A lot of the assessment is based on 100 feet around your home or however far your property line goes out, if it's not 100 feet. So some things we talk about is emergency readiness, making sure you have your go bag ready, your pet carrier by your front door, and then, making sure you have 2 ways out, talking about evacuation information. And then making sure residents are signed up for Alert Marin and Nixle, making sure you get that early notification and warning is essential. And then last year, we completed 109 home assessments district-wide. And then, so this is the overall highlights of the program. We cleared some fire roads, unrelated to Tam Valley, but we also removed a large tree on Wesley. And then the big number that I want everyone to see is last year we removed 793.5 tons of combustible vegetation throughout the district. And that's a huge number. And, we set the bar high last year and we really want to try to beat it this year. So that's a little rundown of all the programs and projects. And you could find all this information actually on our website through the Vegetation Management Program. So that concludes.
Awesome, Jesse. Thank you so much. Thanks for running that down. And once again, Jesse's totally willing to come out and talk to you and your community. His information is on our website, which I'm actually going to share the screen really quick because you have to stop sharing, Jesse.
No, this is the Tam Valley.
There we go. Okay. I'm going to just share my screen here really quick. I just wanted to show you all that this is, you guys are seeing on my screen, I think. So this is, are you seeing the website?
Yeah, that's what we see, Fred. You're good.
Okay. So on the website, if you go to prevention and go down to vegetation management, you'll see that all this information on what Jesse was talking about is here, and the risk assessment in the area that we provide service to. And then at the bottom here, this is the attachment to the Southern Marin Fire Protection District WUI Wildfire Hazard and Risk Assessment. So this is the assessment that I was discussing earlier. So with that, I want to talk briefly about the other portion of areas that we do programs with, and that is we do a lot of try to get grants. So one of the things that we did prior to receiving Measure U money is we really worked with TCSD. We worked with Jim Kasper and other agency, other municipalities to try and receive grant money for doing these projects. And we are still doing that. As a matter of fact, this last year, we were able to, actually Jim was the head of this, and he was able to secure a grant for the district with the district's help for $720,000 to do a fire fuel reduction program in Tam Valley specific. The program, basically, the grant is going to remove vegetation over 4.5 miles of flammable vegetation, over 4.5 miles in the Tam Valley area, and you can see it's outlined in this particular slide. On December 3rd, we are hosting a grant meeting, which will discuss in detail what the grant is about. We'll get input from the neighbors in the neighborhood and just basically answer as many questions as possible. So I invite you to that on December 3rd. If you would like to visit our website and sign up for notification, we'd be happy to get that out to you. We can notify you. It's also going to be I think there was a couple of notifications that were sent out on Nextdoor, and we're going to continue to send those notifications out. So it's something to look forward to here fairly quickly in the near future. Let me just unshare here. The other thing I wanted to briefly talk about was I wanted to talk about Measure C, which is the measure that just passed in the county that supports the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Measure C funding will be available to the Southern Marin Fire District in 2 ways. One is it's available for local mitigation, and for the Southern Marin District, it's about $430,000 that we'll be receiving from the MWPA to do local mitigation, which is similar to what Jesse is doing right now with the chippers, the wide area fuel breaks, and the roadway clearing and whatnot. So we have those programs that we're going to continue doing. But in this particular year, it's going to actually pay for the long range acoustical device, or LRAD. And I'm sure that some of you have heard that terminology. They are sirens, but they also have the ability to broadcast messages at the same time. So you hear a siren, then you would hear a loud message. The areas that we're going to put these devices in Tam Valley and Homestead Valley are Station 4, which is the fire station on Poplar, Eastwood Park, and then over at the Tam Valley Community Center. There's going to be 7 sites in total. The other sites are going to be located in Strawberry, which is at the Southern Marin Fire Station 9, up there on the Seminary, Bel Air School, and then in Sausalito, it's going to be located 2 sites, Marin Ship Tank Park, or the Marin Ship Tank, and then also Cloudview. So these particular devices, along with what Mill Valley has already installed, because Mill Valley put these in last year, will give us a early notification in the event of a wildfire or any disaster. And it'll give you notification so that you know where to go in these events and these emergencies. So costs related to this, they're expensive. So the first year, we're going to be able to put 3 sites in of the 7 sites. So the first 3 sites that we're going to put in is at Station 4 in Tam Valley on Poplar. We're going to put one on Station 9 in Strawberry, and then we're going to put a proposed site at the Cloudview Park in Sausalito. So these are going to be the first areas that'll receive those long-range acoustical devices, and we feel that with this will also broadcast further than these rings. So we're hoping that it will cover more of the area than it's depicted on the map. And then the following year, we're going to be able to put the remaining sites in. So LRAD is it's really an interesting device. It's very effective, but it isn't the end all. It doesn't solve the entire problem of notification and evacuation. So it's really important that you all out there in the audience go to alertmarin.org and you sign yourself up, and so that you sign all your devices up, your cell phones, your home phones, anything that you want to be notified on. So that way, if there is an evacuation or an emergency, you'll be notified through the Alert Marin, and you'll be told where to go in the event of an emergency. Okay, so let's see here. Sorry, navigating it, navigating Zoom. How do I get out of this? Sorry, stop share. There we go. Okay, so with that, the last thing I wanted to just talk about is our upcoming vegetation management projects. So with the biggest project being the actual fire fuel grant in Tam Valley, that's expected to go about 4 years. Jim Kasper leads that, is going to lead that. Mike St. John on our side is going to be the project manager. And then Jesse Fagoni is also going to be helping on that project, but we're going to obviously be hiring companies to reduce that vegetation in Tam Valley. But our near future projects are all going to be related to chippers, roadway widening, so that the fire engines can get up the street and you all can evacuate down the street. And we're also going to be working on evacuation planning. And that was the last thing I wanted to just talk to you about briefly, is evacuation planning. So we've had several meetings, and if you were with us, I believe it was the last meeting with NRG, we had we put on an evacuation training through Zoom, and we have several maps and brochures that are going out to you or have gone out to you. And these maps have information, the brochures have information on evacuation specifically. It tells you how to build a go bag. It tells you evacuation routes and temporary refuge areas. And again, it's also located on our website, so you can get all those maps from our website. And if you would like to hear the entire evacuation meeting that we did, it is on the NRG website, so you can get it from Marin. It's Marin NRG, correct, Pam?
It's nrgmillvalley.org, and I'm putting it in the chat so everyone can see.
Okay. And it's a great presentation. It really does go in depth on how and when and where we're going to be doing the evacuations, if we ever had to do something like that. So with that, I think we're kind of at our 30-minute mark here. And we definitely want to take questions. So I'm not sure who's hosting who's going to be doing the questions, but
that would be me.
Okay.
So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And we're going to lead off with actually a compliment before the questions. And Carol wrote in response to the discussion of the chipper program, "We love the chipper program, thank you." And then there was a question in the chat about PG&E's flyover assessments, and Jesse went ahead and answered that. But just so everyone knows, the question was about access to PG&E's aerial assessments. inspection imaging. And Jesse responded and explained that Southern Marin has had a district-wide WUI hazard assessment, which will help give direction for future projects, and it's going to be up on the website for reference.
Hey, Pam, there was one other question that was direct to me, but I think it's worth sharing with the group.
Okay.
And the question was from Bill. He says, I'm curious how realistic the odds are that we'll get off all the hills when thousands of cars are trying to get out. Is walking more realistic? If there's gridlock, what do we do? Walk to the marsh? So this is a question that we hear regularly from the community, and it's a very valid and important question. So I think everyone recognizes that the Valley provides some really unique challenges to evacuation. And so what we teach very consistently is having both two modes of travel and two ways out. So as much as we would love to be able to provide people with a step-by-step template for every incident, we know that because we can't predict where the fire may be or how it will grow and in what direction, we try to teach people how to make decisions based on the information that is provided. And so, again, we push this idea of two ways out and two modes of travel, because you could start out in your car and then, we have a traffic jam. And so then converting to foot or some other method may be real appropriate. The other part of Bill's question, which I think is really important, is when we talk about evacuations, I think we all have a tendency to sort of think, hey, I got to get out to San Francisco or over to the East Bay, when in reality, what we're really trying to do, as Tom Welch would say, is move you from an unsafe place to a safe place. And that safe place may be a ball field nearby. And so what we have done is we've gone through our Southern Marin area and we've identified what are called community refuge areas, or CRAs. And on the evacuation maps that Fred discussed, these are identified. And I wish Tom was on the line because he's got a great personal story. I think many of you know that he lost his house in the Tubbs fire, and he's had to evacuate multiple times. And so Tom brings, I think, a really great perspective. And one of the things that he shared was, as his neighborhood was burning down, he lost his home. Literally, you could have been in the middle of the street and been safe. And the point that he was trying to make is that we need to sort of reset our understanding of what evacuation is, so that we can sort of reduce the perhaps unnecessary traffic, or certainly reduce the tendency for that to clog, and be much more strategic and managed in how we do this. And if we can get people to a temporary refuge, or what we call a community refuge area, temporarily, then we can begin to get people out in a much more organized fashion. So I thought that was a great question from Bill.
Yeah. We have some follow-up questions on evacuation, so we can stay on that for a moment. In the chat, we've posted the link for the recording of the evacuation meeting, and that's on a page on the NRG website, which has a number of different video recordings that are really helpful. So when you go to look for the evacuation, browse through the rest of them because they're great. Another evacuation question is, are there printed evacuation instructions available for people without internet access? We have several people who are not on computers.
Absolutely. So if you want to call the fire district, we would be happy to mail you one of those evacuation brochures. We sent them out to everybody in the district, but the mail sometimes doesn't get there. But yeah, we would be happy to send out another evacuation flyer. Just call the district and we'll get it to you.
Great, thank you. This is a Firewise question. As an individual, I'm about to get rid of 3 acacias. Does Firewise want us to report the money that we spend?
No, I'll take that one. This is Jim. The short answer is yes. There's a bit of a longer answer and explanation. I didn't do a complete job in introducing the Firewise program. It is a national program. It involves submitting documentation about concerns of the community and plans for risk reduction. There is also a requirement to annually report on the work that was done within the community. One of the things that's been available recently through FireSafe Marin is an online reporting form whereby an individual can report any work that they've done, whether it's vegetation management or even home hardening work, for example, replacing foundation screens or any, roofing changes or whatever. And I will make that available to everybody. I think I'll get everybody's email address, but also find a way to post that information and get it out to people. It's a real easy form to fill out. Again, anything that is done from a fire risk reduction point of view, it's all approximate. It's, your honest opinion, and it's helpful in just documenting what is being done within the community.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
Jim, if I can add one additional, it's not just a financial allocation, but it's also the amount of time spent. So if individuals are not paying contractors and they're doing the work themselves, that time can also be tracked, and I believe can be submitted to that same exact form. And that's an important number to account for as well.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. That's actually true. Like, it is both what you hire, but also any time you spend on your own. Thanks.
Good. On another subject, are there any funds available from either Measure U or Measure C to fund a coordinator for Tam Valley NRG Network?
So I will take that one, Pam. I know that that's a question that has been asked of us, and we are assessing that. I would say at this moment, no, we don't have the ability to fully fund that ourselves. We are certainly exploring some partnerships with our other government agencies to see if there is a way for us to do that. We recognize both the need and the value, but currently we don't have the capability of funding that entirely ourselves.
Thank you. So we're back on evacuation. If the traffic is bad going to the fields at Mount Tam School, which is one of our designated community refuge areas, community CRAs, yes, or Tam Valley School, is there a better alternative? So I'll rephrase the question. We have 3 designated refuge areas. If the traffic is too bad to get to one of those, is there a better alternative?
So I can kind of take that. So these community refuge areas, and they're also known as temporary refuge areas, are really the last ditch effort of trying to save yourself. They're not designed for you to just, get in your car and just evacuate to. If you have time, and obviously you should, evacuate as soon as you're notified, or even sooner if you're driving up Shoreline Highway and you see a big column of smoke coming from somewhere that's near your home, it's probably not a good idea to keep going in that direction. You should probably turn around and find somewhere else to be for a little while. But, if you're forced to evacuate and you have enough time, you should evacuate out of the area, not go to a CRA or a TRA. Those are designed specifically, those areas are specifically designed so that if you need to evacuate and you have no other means of getting to a safe area to wait out the fire, those are the areas that you go to. It'll be smoky, it may be hot, but you will survive a fire as it burns through the area. So then what happens after that is we come up, and actually it wouldn't be fire. This is all law enforcement that does the evacuation. We're obviously fighting the fire. And they would have a means for you to evacuate to a safer location. They would tell you, okay, now it's time to go to this location. And they would have you go to another location. When we talk about community areas where we're going to conjugate after you've been evacuated, we're talking about things like the Marin Civic Center, because obviously that'll hold a lot more people than a ball field. So if you're being asked to evacuate and you need to get to somewhere safe, that's exactly where you're going to go. You're going to go somewhere out of the area, so that way fire crews can come in and fight the fire until it's safe to go back in, or you're told it's safe to go back. But most likely these evacuation centers are going to be located in places like the Marin Civic Center or some area that will host a large amount of people.
Thank you. We have two follow-up CRA questions. One is, would the Good Earth parking lot be an option to serve as a CRA?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other is our resident notes, as far as he can tell, there are no CRAs around Upper Dolan Avenue. And so what would be the appropriate alternative?
So that's a tough one. So obviously we, in our maps, we identified the areas that we felt that, that you were survivable if you went to these areas and a fire had to blow through and you weren't able to get to safety. These would be the areas that you would be safe. So if it's not depicted on the map, then you have to make sure that you're getting out sooner and you're going to an area that has a large area of wide open space that you would be able to let the fire burn through. But we identified these areas, and honestly, I don't have a specific answer to that question other than to leave early.
Fred, this is Jim. I guess I'll ask it I'll answer the question from a personal point of view. I think what happens is people think about evacuation and they're picturing a situation where they have to do something immediately because they've been told it's an evacuation order. The recommendation, and frankly, what I'm going to be doing, is you will get an evacuation warning, which could be up to 2 hours before there's an imminent threat. My own personal view is I'm getting the heck out of here when I get that evacuation warning. So I'm going to avoid the traffic jam, hopefully. And B, I am not going to be looking at a CRA or any place else as a place to go. I'm going to try to move as far away as I can. And in general, the recommendation is you don't go up, you go down. So you want to take care of that. And in that regard, what was talked about was the session on October 27th with Southern Marin Fire on evacuation. But there was also a video that was done on Fire Safe Marin's website on August 25th. It's about an hour and 15 minutes or so about evacuations. And what's important in my mind in that is there's actually about a 6-minute section where a person who was in Paradise and was involved with that evacuation, and it goes through her thought processes. And to me, it's an interesting psychological review of what somebody who knew what they should do didn't do, and yet was able to get out of the area safely. So I'd recommend looking at both of those videos.
Thanks. A couple more questions. When an alarm goes off, an alert or an alarm, LRAD, how do I get real-time information about where the fire is coming from? I'm 3/4 of the way up Hawk Hill and would want to know how to decide whether to go up over the hill and down to 101. Excuse me, down to Highway 1.
So with the Alert Marin system, when they notify you, it'll come through as a text message for a cell phone or maybe a phone call to your house. And they're going to give specific instruction as where the fire is and where to evacuate to. The same with LRAD. What LRAD does is it will have a high-pitched sound like a siren first, and then it'll go from there to a voice. And it's no different than somebody yelling over a loudspeaker. We remember that in high school, when they're all yelling at you with the loudspeakers on the field. That's exactly what it is. And it's it covers a greater area, and it'll tell you where the fire is and where to go.
Yeah, Fred, let me just add on to that, because I think, it's really important for folks to understand that there is sort of no, one system that will serve all purposes and won't fail. I mean, if that's the one thing we learned from the Tubbs fire was that redundancy is really important. And so that's, certainly what we have built into Marin County through a variety of tools like Alert Marin, the LRAD system, Nixle, all of these other types of tools that we have. So really the key in all of this is to ensure that you are connected to those, all of those systems, and that you keep those systems active. So for example, we have folks who say, I don't want to keep my cell phone by my bed at night, or I turn it off. Great, we're not going to tell you not to do that, but when you do that, you are effectively shutting down one of those means in which we communicate that information. So again, redundancy is really part of the key in here, is making sure that you're aware of all the different systems and getting connected to those and just staying informed.
This is Jim again. I'd like to add a couple other things sort of for the future. Going along a little bit with what the chief just talked about, what some people may be aware of on their phones, and I think it's, I have an iPhone, Apple, and I think it's also available on the Android phones, is you can indicate phone numbers that will interrupt even when you have "don't interrupt me" at night. If you put in the phone number or essentially the number that's associated with Alert Marin, that will be added to that list of interruption phone numbers. So you can easily set it up so that even at night when your phone is available, but if you will, blocked, you would get a notification. The other thing I want to mention is one of the things being looked at from Fire Safe Marin is, and some people are concerned, well, what happens when the cell towers go out? I don't have phone service and so on. There are small portable radios that are available, and Fire Safe Marin's doing a study on these, that you could have at your bedside that will act like, if you think of it similar to a weather radio reporting tornadoes, for example, in the Midwest, where you could get a notification. That's not ready for prime time at this point in time, but there is some work being done where those would be available, and the cost of those is something like $25 once they're set up.
I have another question that's somewhat related to evacuation, and it's in response to the advice to leave your house unlocked when you evacuate. And for residents who live particularly on the valley floor, should they be concerned about security and looting?
So we get this question all the time, and honestly, it's a personal decision. So this is kind of how it works from an operation standpoint. Is if we come up to your house and we're doing structure protection on your house during a wildfire, and we need to enter your house, we're getting in. Now, if you leave the door unlocked, that is helpful because we usually try before we pry, and that way, we won't damage your house. However, again, it's a personal. It's kind of up to you. When we evacuate, people don't come back in. They're out, and law enforcement takes a huge stand on that. We saw this in the Tubbs fire and many other fires where, law enforcement, as soon as you left the area, you weren't allowed to go back in that area. You're out. And in some cases, they even call the National Guard in. The National Guard will actually secure the area until such time that the area is released back to the residents. So we can't guarantee that there's not going to be looting, but we can say that, there's obviously law enforcement, and this is a law enforcement question, but they do everything they can to make sure that looting doesn't happen in the area. So again, personal preference.
Thanks, Fred. I also got a question that I'll go ahead and field about NRGs and Tam Valley. And I am the chair of the Tamalpais Valley NRG Network Steering Committee, and I know there are a number of block captains on this call. And you can learn about us at nrgmillvalley.org. And Tamalpais Valley is divided up into 15 NRGs, which are neighborhood resource groups. And it's all anchored in the concept of neighbors helping neighbors. And we currently have 45 active clusters with about 70, just over 70 active block captains. And we're always looking for more. So if you would like to volunteer, please get in touch with us. And we are part of this web of support in preparation and response for emergencies and disasters. And we are really thrilled to be and delighted to be working with Firewise and Jim, and to be working with Southern Marin Fire and all these great people that you see here tonight, giving of their time to help us be prepared to respond. So we're happy to let you know more, but I just wanted to take advantage of that question and respond now. We have a question about the steps and paths, and how to address the fact that there has been encroachment on some of the steps, lanes, and paths in Tam Valley, and whether there is consideration to mapping those and publishing maps in order to make people more aware and perhaps put some pressure on those who have encroached on those access areas.
Yeah, so I can kind of answer that question. So we are aware that there has been easements and paths and stairs that have been encroached on by the neighbors. The county really did not and still doesn't have the means to maintain those stairs, lanes, and paths. So unfortunately, the neighbors kind of put their fences across those. Now, the MWPA is looking at all these evacuation routes, and they're looking at these specific areas of evacuation, and we are too, for that matter. We're looking at some of these stairs and lanes and paths, like Mill Valley did. Mill Valley has a network of stairs, lanes, and paths. And we're looking at ways that we can work with the neighbors who have encroached on those stairs, lanes, and paths to give those back. And we're looking for ways to, financially maintain those, get those back up and feasible. Some of them are just not. Some of them are the hillsides are just way too steep. It would be too difficult to maintain those paths and those stairs or put the stairs in. But there are some areas that we are definitely looking at, and we are planning that once those stairs, lanes, and paths are back up to a usable state, that we are going to map those out as routes that you can use during an evacuation.
And Fred, I would just add to that, for those of you who are interested in learning more about NRGs, if you go to the Tam Valley NRG site, we have a map of all the different Tam Valley NRGs, and we have started adding in the accessible, kind of cleaned up, accessible, safe paths that we're aware of. We're not adding things that are difficult to traverse, or areas where there has been some impediment to getting through. But those ones that are clean and wide and safe are being slowly added in.
And just to kind of add on to that, just to give a little perspective. So in a wildfire situation, especially when you're trying to evacuate, a wildfire situation, it's very dark. It's very smoky. Visibility is very poor. So it's really important and critical that you have a safe evacuation route. And that's why we always say, streets are wide. I mean, if the smoke's literally banking down really low, you can still follow the yellow line down the hill. So, getting off onto a trail or onto a path that is not marked properly and wide enough and safe enough is just really not a good idea. You can get easily mixed up and turned around on that path, and then you're stranded, and that's not a good situation. So we are looking for paths that make sense, and just something to consider when you evacuate.
We have one more, no more questions. One comment in the chat is about the, on the Southern Marin website, the maps, which I guess are fueled by or fed by Marin maps, which the user finds difficult to use because of all the filters that have to be set. And there was a suggestion that it would be easier if it would be possible to get PDFs of the maps that have the specific information that Southern Marin Fire is trying to convey. Thank you, Fred.
And Fred, you're muted.
Fred, can you unmute?
Sorry, am I muted?
There you are. Now you're unmuted. Okay, you're good.
Thanks, Chief. Sorry. I tend to do that. So on our website, I picked it out. You go to preparedness, wildfire preparedness. That brings you to this page here. And this actually has a bunch of information on wildfire preparedness, but on the attachments, we have the evacuation route map, which is a PDF. This is actually the flyer itself. It has all the sign up for alerts and whatnot, and then it also has the map for Tam Valley. So you can obviously download this and print it out.
Thank you. All right, I know we're close to time and we don't have any questions waiting in the chat. So Jim, do you want to?
Yes, ma'am. So hopefully we've given you some good introductions to the plan, the existing and the planned work that Southern Marin Fire has been providing from a fire prevention point of view. As everybody from the district has described, there's a lot more coming. So we'll just provide additional updates in the future. Fred or maybe the chief had mentioned that there is a meeting scheduled. I'm not sure the publicity is out yet regarding the grant that Fred discussed. That meeting is going to be at 6 o'clock on Thursday, December 3rd. For those of you who saw, when you saw the map, and to make sure it's clear to everybody, the plan for this work starts basically at the entrance of the Fernwood Cemetery. They, in fact, are going to be cooperating and helping out with work along that section from Fernwood and down along Tennessee Valley Road. And then all of the other agencies that are involved are also, these conversations have been held with those agencies as well. So again, we'll keep on sending out notices on future meetings. I encourage you to look at the information on the links provided for Southern Marin Fire and also for Fire Safe Marin. And finally, especially Tam Valley NRG. There will probably be a lot more information to be available through NRG. And as Pam mentioned, I'll just put out the word, please sign up to participate in NRG and preferably as a block captain. And with that, thank you very much for attending. And if you have any other questions, I've also included the email ID for Tam Valley Firewise, which is tamvalleyfirewise@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you can send information or any questions to that email address. And you can go to the NRG site too, if you have any questions regarding the neighborhood response groups. And again, thank you all for attending, and especially for all the participants and the members from Southern Marin Fire for providing the information to the community. Have a good evening.